Okay, so for the group project, I decided to do mine on complete street ordinances, and I was joined in this project by Jonathan and Seth. I decided to work on this project mainly because it was one that was suggested by Dr. Spear, and I wanted to learn more about complete streets for myself. The goal of this project was to develop a complete street ordinance that could be helpful to Terre Haute or other small towns as well. So when we first started this project, I didn't really have much knowledge about what a complete street was. Basically, what I found was that a complete street is a street that is designed for all users. So that means the street would be accessible to pedestrians, cyclists, public transit users, as well as people using their personal vehicles. And this is a sketch that Seth actually drew of what his idea of a complete street is. And you can see how in the sketch he has shown how the street would accommodate things such as pedestrians and cyclists, as well as regular traffic. And what I thought was interesting about his sketch is that he actually added in medians with vegetation, and there's actually recycling bins here too. And I thought those are really good additions to add as well. So here's just an outline of some of the things that we thought would be good for a complete street, and this was all designed by Seth as well. Um, so on here he has bike lanes, recycling stations, medians with vegetation, energy efficient street lamps, and even sound barriers. Those were all good ideas that I thought were brought up by him. And then these are just additional ideas that were also brought up by Seth. They're just different things that he thought could possibly be included in a complete street. Uh, One thing on here that I thought was really interesting was his idea about trucking routes. Um, I know that I don't like being stuck behind semis, and I'm sure a lot of other people have that same feeling. And I thought the idea of having a way to divert them away from other people would be really good in cutting down on traffic. Okay, so here we're getting into the methods that I used in my research. Since Seth, John, and I we all live in different cities, we thought it would be a good idea for us to research the ordinances in our own towns. For me, that meant researching Los Angeles and California as a whole, while Seth and John worked on Terre Haute and Santa Claus. To start my research, I wanted to do a survey to gain insight into people's knowledge of complete streets. And after I made the survey, Seth and John helped send it out through social media. And then we all agreed that it would be good to get an interview with a city official to ask them about complete streets. Excuse me. For me, I sent out requests for interviews via email, but I never received any replies. I don't know if that has to do with LA being such a big city, or if they were just really busy or what, but it was still a little disappointing that I couldn't even get a reply from anyone. Be that as it may, my final plan was to use the information that I gathered through the survey and the research of LA's ordinances to come up with a plan that I thought would be useful for smaller towns. Okay, so getting into the results of the survey, I was a little disappointed that we only had 63 people take the survey, but we were still able to get some pretty good information out of it. The main points of the survey that I'm going to focus on are that most people didn't know what complete streets were before taking this survey, but after they learned a little bit about them, they actually said that they would be willing to use them if they were constructed in their areas. And probably the most interesting thing I found was that a lot of people were actually open to helping pay for them by way of paying slight increases in their taxes. Alright, so the next few slides are just going to be of some of the data collected from the survey. On this one, you can see that only 20 out of 63 people even knew what a complete street was before the survey. And also you can see how likely people would be to use bicycle lanes if they were available. And if we disregard the people who answered neither likely or unlikely, we can get pretty even results with 28 people saying they probably wouldn't bike more and 27 people saying that they would. So it's pretty much 50-50. And to me, those are still pretty favorable results and show that bike lanes would actually be a welcome addition to many different areas. And then continuing on with the data collected from the survey, we can see here how likely people would be to use public transportation if it were available to them. Again, after disregarding those who answered neither likely or unlikely, we still get pretty even results. We have 20 people saying that they would use public transportation and 28 saying that they wouldn't. So it's basically another 50-50 result. And to me, if I were designing a complete street, if I could get half of the population of an area to stop using their own cars and start using bikes and public transportation, then that's a huge win for me. And the other one here, it's probably a result that is most surprising to me, and it's that 57 people said they would walk more places instead of drive if they had practical walking lanes in their area. That's a huge thing when working towards a complete street, because through my research, I found that walking lanes are the easiest and least expensive thing that there is to construct. And then here's the last slide that I have of data from the survey, and it's just showing that after learning what complete streets are, most people would actually like to have them in their towns. The results of that are very encouraging, and they had 57 people saying that they would be at least somewhat interested in their town having complete streets. And then the last piece of data is another surprising thing, because it shows that 31 people would be willing to pay increased taxes to fund a complete street project. That's significant because these projects can be pretty expensive with all the concrete and different materials it needs to make a complete street. And a lot of times they don't happen because towns don't have the right funds or enough funds to start working on them. Alright, so now we're moving into the results of my personal research into the complete street ordinances of Los Angeles and California. The first thing that I found was that California's Bureau of Engineering actually has its own complete streets division that oversees the construction of roads. And within that, they actually have a statewide action plan. Well, they have many statewide action plans for complete streets, but one that I chose to focus on is called Toward an Act of California, the State Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. And that plan was enacted in 2017 and has the goal of enabling everyone in California to be able to bike or walk safely for their transportation needs by 2040. One thing that I found that was really interesting about that was that program actually includes the community in the planning process. So they'll ask if they would like to have more sidewalks, more bike lanes, or any other different components of a complete street. That way they're not wasting their time and their money on something that the community is not actually going to use. And then another interesting thing that California does is it utilizes things known as quick builds. And what quick builds are just a fast, inexpensive way to get a complete street design constructed. So instead of using expensive materials such as concrete and metal, they'll use materials like paint and plastics to speed up construction and keep costs low. So for instance, instead of pouring a new concrete sidewalk, they will instead use paint to paint crosswalks and section off an area of an already established road for pedestrians and cyclists. And then they'll use plastic barriers to actually separate them from the main road to cut down on collisions with vehicles. And then another thing about quick builds is that they can easily be rearranged or even taken down completely if people are unhappy with the design. So California oftentimes uses quick builds as a sort of trial run for a complete street design while they wait for funding for more expensive materials. And then even when they do secure the funding for more expensive materials, a lot of the times they'll only use more expensive materials like concrete and metal at high traffic areas like intersections. and that allows them to have excess money left over to actually go on and build more complete streets in different areas. Alright, so now we're getting into what we can take from all of the results that I got. First and foremost, the first thing is that the public needs to be made aware of what complete streets are and the benefits of them. And we also learned that people would indeed use complete streets if available, and they wouldn't even mind paying an increase in taxes to help fund the complete streets. That's how much they would like to have them in their areas. And then what was really encouraging was finding out that the ordinances in California for complete streets have actually been greatly effective. What I found was that due to the complete streets in California, they've seen less vehicle accidents, increased foot and bicycle traffic, less speeding drivers, and reduced collisions between pedestrians and vehicles. And all those things are great goals to have when working towards a complete street. So it's clear to me that many good things can be taken from the ordinances here in California. Okay, so bringing the whole project together, I have my personal steps to what I believe would be a good complete street ordinance. Starting out first, I would gather feedback from the community where a complete street is being proposed. I believe it's important to include the people who will actually be using the street in the planning process. And then second, once the design was agreed upon between the public and the designers, I would utilize a quick build. I would do this so the street could get done quickly and wouldn't be closed during construction. Also, this would help with the cost of materials since we would be using things like paint and thermoplastics instead of concrete. Then I believe it would be smart to monitor the effectiveness of the complete street during a trial run. And then while we were doing that, if we found that the street wasn't having the desired results we wanted, it could easily be rearranged or taken down because we were only using inexpensive materials. But if we found that the street was having the desired effects, such as increased foot traffic, then I would focus on installing concrete barriers around intersections while leaving the plastic ones in less busy areas. By focusing the resources on high traffic areas, it would allow us to save money and create more complete streets. And then finally, I believe it would be beneficial to follow California's lead with their statewide action plans. That way, instead of focusing on just small towns or individual towns, we could be working towards making the entire state have complete streets. Alright, so wrapping up the whole project, I started off by asking myself what I've learned, and I have to say that I've learned a great deal from this project. My understanding of complete streets and their benefits has really grown throughout working on this project. Uh, Before I started working on it, I really didn't know what a complete street was or pretty much anything about it, but through all the research, I've learned a great deal. And then, was the goal accomplished? In my opinion, I believe that the goal was accomplished. Dr. Spear wanted us to come up with an ordinance for complete streets that could be implemented in an area such as Terre Haute, and I believe that I've provided a few things that could be very useful there. What do I believe could be improved upon? Really, the only thing that I wish I could have done differently is actually be able to sit down face to face with Seth and John to work on this project. Being so far away and 3 hours behind them in time made it difficult to work on this as an actual group. But I guess that's just what you get with distance classes. Everyone's from different areas, and it just makes it a little more difficult when doing group projects. And then I really do think that this project can help in developing complete street ordinances in other areas. I think the things I discussed have shown to be effective here in California, and I don't see why they can't be as effective in another area since they're working so well out here in California. Okay, and then these last two slides, they're just the references that I used throughout the project. And just to wrap everything up, I want to thank everyone who took the time to listen to this presentation, and I hope that anyone who took the time to listen to it was able to learn something from it. Thank you.